Alright, today's piano sadness comes in the form of the perfect world of Kai, or Piano no Mori. Masayuki Kojima was the director and storyboarder, who's probably most well known for his monster adaptation, as well as Made in Abyss. This time he's returning with a lot of his members from that monster team to make his first debut as a filmmaker, which has a lot of style and flavour throughout. Now one of those returning members happens to be Shigeru Fujita, who is a character designer and chief animation director, as well as on his prior project. Now this is the first adaptation of the manga, which was inspired by Stanislav Bunning's 1985 Chopin's competition performance because of his unorthodox playing and style. Oh yeah, but he also won too. Now that becomes in the shape of these two boys that contrast with each other, one being the quiet, polite, rich boy, and the other being brash and poor. One from a private family who had the lineage of pianists with them, and the other whose mother is implied to be a woman of the night. Now the way it handles its piano shots and using crossfades kind of sets a tone not dissimilar to the competitive performance style of actual real-life competitions. While we begin as a transfer student, it's soon enough that there's a relationship brewing between these two boys. There's definitely a strong connection there, and we start to see these things just through the character acting, which is a real standout. While this begins to look like a kind of wholesome, fun little story, the brashness of the bullies and Kai himself sort of bring it back down to a more relatable area. There's a stripped back violence between these young boys, and the character acting really sells that. From the tiniest to the biggest of emotional features, that garish quality that these children talk so bluntly gives it more character, especially to this small Japanese countryside town. To be honest, to me, there's no surprise here that the musical orchestration of the soundtrack is really good. Really solid stuff, especially the way it slow builds between the movements of actual real piano animation, which is a mix of 2D and some close-up 3D stuff as seen later in Kids in the Slope, or Carol on Tuesday. And there's no mistake there because the animation director happened to work on the latter show much later on. You certainly get a feeling for this being at first a pleasant piano story with an undercurrent of sort of cruel, vindictive, real-world life. Piano circles tend to be very separated by class, which does make Kai's experience of just playing the piano different than his friends. Being unorthodox is not exactly something that is praised upon, which Kai knows is. Kai's whole life is like a living representation of that. Even though there's kind of a limited frame count, this isn't the biggest production, I do think the staff have done a great work, especially with every single one of the animation directors. You've got people working from Telecom to Madhouse to Ghibli, or people who even worked with Jose de Pryor, and it shows. The main boy seems to see practice as a mandatory situation in that he is planning his way through, pre-designed, which is quite a different perspective from the career-ended burnout pianist that happens to be teaching Kai in the end. Now, because of an accident that he got himself into, he could not play the piano anymore. It was specifically a very particular piano, one that now Kai rested on. Now, there's definitely this sort of emotional scene that seems maybe a little overdramatic on first thought, breaking down by a piano and all this. But I think I really understand where he's coming from. The idea of an accident, losing your potential, losing the ability for something that basically drove you as a person your whole life. I can understand that premise of being incredibly frustrated with it. I mean, in a very minor sense, I've been battling with carpal tunnel for the last couple of months, and there is just a creeping fear about how, if it's even possible to recover from it. It hits you pretty fast out of nowhere, If I was thrown into his situation, I don't really know what I'd do either. So I understand his kind of grumpier exterior and why he's so excited about Kai, even if it goes beyond reasonable contact. I also have to give it credit to the show for its sort of beautiful use of the forest. Every time we see it in the movie, it's shown within a different context. He's giving it a new feeling, tone, and colour palette. In this case, they really highlight the beauty of the moonlight, as well as the elegant playing. We start to reveal the main concept of the story, which is the competition to become a professional player. we start to see how the boys' philosophies contrast with each other in terms of how this is going to go, especially when Kai is suggested strongly to get himself involved in the competition. But I think it's quite funny to see how Chopin actually plays quite a pivotal role in the story here, since it was the Chopin competition that ultimately inspired this production in itself. Another preference of the film is you get a quick summary of old dead German pianists, and and Chopin, of course. Kai's recklessness actually kind of relieves itself into the story. If it's from his bloody fights he gets into on a day-to-day basis, or even trying to just get through school. Kai living at home, still having to brunt through drunken tirades. His life at school is nothing but a fight. In pretty much any situation, it's all an upward struggle. The only escape he really has is his secret world, if you know what I'm saying. So you can kind of see why he would resent his friend's sort of position to tell him what to do, trying to get him into this world that it's fair for him to feel that he doesn't belong there. He can't even pay for the lessons himself. It's not really even a possibility on paper if it wasn't for the conceit of the story. On the other side with Amamiya, to be the best, he needs the best teacher. And while he gets into these little feuds with his friend here, and these stories tend to have these points where the two friends become kind of tense with each other, let's say. I understand the hot-headed behaviour here and concerns, because Kai resents Amamiya's position. Absolutely. He thinks he's naive. He's being realistic that to be part of the Japanese pianist world, he would have to change his behaviours and the way he acts and the way he does things, ultimately changing him as a person, which is not something he's willing to do. Working within that context, as they go on and they see each other's world from a different perspective, whether that be Kai doing his training or Amamiya going into Kai's world, there becomes a silent understanding between them of the contrast of their situation. They learn a little bit about each other's lives, and that understanding fills the tear between them, sort of empathy for why they are doing what they're doing, and what the contest means for them from different perspectives. Sometimes the CGI, as it is the case with this generation with Madhouse, can be a little garish, can stand out a little bit awkwardly. Most of the 2D animation really fills in for that situation. This shot right here. Legendarily corny, silly, and a bit confusing. I don't know if I hate it or love it, but it's right there. So what we're looking at here is piano as fate, piano as escape. One inherited through family, and one learned by just the pure nature of it all. But mainly the core of this film is about these two boys' relationship, their friendship, and where it's going. And you can kind of see the full frontal of their impact in all ways during the competition. The full-on nature versus nurture kind of situation. Set into the parameters of the Japanese young competitive era of the early 2000s. Towards the end, you can kind of feel the burden on Kai, as this is the first thing he's taken serious on a competitive level, and he really is out of place during those scenes in comparison to all the other children who are definitely from a different environment than him. I'm glad to see that he rejects their ways and sort of sticks to his guns to define his own path as a pianist, even if it doesn't win him anything in the short term. I think in the long term it will be the better situation for himself. And it's nice to see him in a kinder, gentler position, not having to be tooth and nail with the young girl who's ugly crying in the most ghibli way you can expect. It's very cute, it's very encouraging, it shows a different side to him, how they were from enemies to friend, and it gives Kai a little bit more vulnerability, making him a little bit more relatable. We only see a lot of the harsher edges of him a lot of the time. It adds a bit of levity, a bit of humour into the story, which I can appreciate. I think the director really likes a sort of 360 turn to be a staple of his. And if anything, you can tell the monster director is very good at building up tension, using uncomfortable sound design and an impressive musical animation to put it all together. The way they use the crescendo, the forest spinning, different particular angles to avoid having to animate as much of the piano playing, which I guess is no wonder. In Japan, you tend to do the animation first before adding the music, so precise rotoing for piano shots is going to be quite difficult. But what is shown is a pretty good fit. We sort of are breaking into the strictness of the Japanese system here, sort of playing with the expectation of learning, going beyond that. Which is only implied in this movie. It kind of feels like there's more that could be happening as the future goes on. This movie actually made a little bit of money on the box office for what it was expected to do. Probably enough for them to actually have the interest to then go off and make a TV show a couple years afterwards, which is still going to this day, although from what I've seen of the piano scenes, it looks much worse. But maybe the rest of the show is good, I don't know. I'd actually be quite interested in seeing where the overall story goes. My interest was piqued here, with its luscious backgrounds and good character animation, fun, simple plot, and just beautiful music scenes. No, I hope they actually finally translate the manga, because I'd definitely be into reading that all. Now, would I recommend this one? Well, as far as piano stories go, yeah, I'd say so. The piano story is pretty decent. I wish these creators had kept making it. But hey, don't take it from me. Don't take it to me. Who am I? Just take it from my good friend, City Snap. I mean, my old buddy, old pal. I definitely know her in real life for sure. What's an underrated anime movie that you'd recommend to your audience?
I would have to say Hoturobi no Mori. I'm murdering it, I bet. And I would also have to say Piano no Mori. A lot of these movies are taking places in forests for some reason.
Excellent. The stuff with anime Amadeus is pretty funny, and the animation is as solid when it needs to be. Give it a go. Let's thank the patrons before we go out. Alex Moratti, Jovin, Daniel Strait, and that Puerto Rican guy. And we'll catch you next time. Like, subscribe, ring the bell if you want more videos. We've got 10 of them coming out until the end of the year. We've got a big one coming next time though. So yeah, I'm hoping you're enjoying, and I'll see you next time.